Hi, my name's Hannah Stapleton and I'm going to be reading from the opening chapter of my novel, Blue Tears. When I was born, my mother told me, when I breached and emerged from between her legs and into the artificial light, I made no sound. For the first minute and a half or so, I did not scream or cry out. There was a terrible silence, she said. I thought you might have been dead. You had died out of my womb. When it was clear that I was breathing, there was a collective sigh of relief in the delivery room, as well as what I imagined to be a shudder up and down the ancestral line. And the whiff of death, or the intimations of it, that had been hanging around like a toxic cloud, began to lift. The small clinic I was delivered in would eventually become a cancer research centre, and then a funeral director's, and later would be torn down to make way for the car park of a 24-hour convenience store. After that, I don't know. It hasn't happened yet. If our descendants are products as well as people, then I would say there was Kay, my mother, and Jack, my father, and my grandparents, Dorothy and Frank, and Melanie and Paul in there alongside me as I gestated in the womb. And there was also the global pharmaceutical industry. My mother was taking Asacol for the bleeding in her bowel, and azathioprine for the inflammation, and codeine phosphate for the pain in her intestines, and gabapentin for the neuropathic pain in her head. These two slipped into the bloodline through the lining of the placenta and became part of the family. My mother kept my umbilical cord after it fell out. She enshrined it behind a sheet of cellophane in a photo album. A black, withered thing, tiny and hard as a rock, and as alien to me as if it were a lunar sample. When I learned that the moon may have originally been a chunk of Earth that around 4.5 million years ago, through sheer accident or destiny, was broken off and exiled from the rest of itself, to be forever held in the Earth's persistent orbit, I thought, now that is enduring love. If I were to crush the umbilical cord, grind it to a powder, and flush it down the toilet or blow it into a city smog, would that be enough to destroy the bond between us? Ding dong, the end, roll credits, lights up, we're free. The first time I heard about the Midnight Moving Company was from a man I met online. For a couple of weeks we'd been exchanging messages in which he told me things about himself, and I barely revealed anything personal that could be said to be true, apart from my name and age. There was little about myself that I felt to be significant enough to share with anyone else. I already had a vague sense then that I was waiting to leave, to begin a new life. Inside of me, the low roar of imminent change was rising. But until that happened, and I knew who I was going to become, I was in a type of limbo. And anything I said had a way of sounding dated and irrelevant as soon as I'd uttered it. The man was older than me by 9 years. That didn't bother me. It didn't bother me either when he wrote, "So what do you like to do for fun?" His profile photo was enough to hold my attention. It was not that I had a type and he was it. It was nothing to do with his build or fashion sense. What interested me about him was the faint pink scar that ran from his right nostril and down along his upper lip, and that I knew must have come from a long ago surgery to correct a cleft palate. So when he suggested that we meet in person, I agreed. The day of the date, I considered washing my hair but decided against it. I put on a black and white polka dot shirt with a depressed looking bow at the front and some clean jeans, and mostly avoided the mirror. I slipped quietly into my mother's bedroom. She was sleeping. Her mouth hung open, lungs wheezing like a pair of sunken ships. I lowered the blind on the dwindling day and turned on the bedside lamp. She didn't flinch. I tidied her pill collection, stacking blister packets and throwing the empties, vials 3/4 full. replaced the child safety lids on the little brown bottles, righted the ones which had fallen on their sides. She never kept to a routine, taking them haphazardly, self-administering as and when. All of the lids on the plastic pillbox marked by days were flipped up. It was only Tuesday. She found it hard to keep track. I collected the dirty plate and bowls from the floor beside her bed. She keeps there too, propped up against the wall, a 16-centimetre chef's knife with a plastic handle, a hammer and a fake handgun she bought herself on eBay, lined up like prizes in a television game show. I never saw her actually wield any of them, but I wonder if she reaches for them during sleep or on waking from a nightmare. Having them there seems to reassure her. Just in case, was what she said, though in case of what she never defined. I drew her door closed and went downstairs. Mr. Payne was in the living room, reclining in the lazy boy, wearing a black fedora and my mother's velour dressing gown. A huge book was balanced in his lap, titled Anatomy and Pathology, Volume 3. He looked up, gave me one of those long, suggestive looks that I found impossible to decipher. Then he turned the book round so that I could see the text, and tapped his finger against a colour image near the top on the left-hand page. I took a half step toward him. It was a close-up of a baby's face. A white woolen cap was tied round its head and fastened by a silk ribbon, and a large thumb was pressing the child's chin, holding its mouth open for the shot. One of its nostrils was missing, along with half of its top lip, creating a hole, like a doorway through which I could see into the shadowy recess of its throat. It was an uncomfortable proximity. The knowledge, like a clammy hand taking hold, that Mr. Payne knew the intimate particulars of my life, knew where I was going and with who. I had the feeling he could see into every part of me. How he knew exactly was still unclear. Maybe he hacked my laptop. Maybe he was a mind reader. He seemed to have that talent or authority, as if he could be everywhere and nowhere at the same time, like a god or wireless. Thank you very much.